Good evening. Sorry for the inconvenience. I'm starting a little late tonight because it was one of those days where I got behind and could never get caught up. So, welcome to Everyday Mental Health, and this is week 3 of Talk to a Therapist. So, I'm happy to welcome any questions you have. Just put them in the chat. And if you're watching this on the replay, welcome. Please be sure and join us live so you can get your questions answered too. So good to have you here. I was thinking, I barely got home to set this up tonight. And so maybe this would be a good time to talk about kind of what it's like to be a therapist. So in the last 7 years, I've worked 3 radically different types of therapeutic jobs. So let me give you an idea what it's like now. Now I have reduced my practice to 3 days a week. So I work from 10 to 7, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So for me, I am in essentially a 1099 employee situation where I work for a practice called Mending Minds that's owned by a psychiatric nurse practitioner named Lindsay Russell. And that means I go to the office. I see my first client at 10 o'clock. These are hour sessions. I see another one at 11. I take a lunch. See more clients at 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and am typically done at 6. So I believe if I count correctly and have thought about it, that is 7 people a day. And each of those 7 situations is unique, which is some of what I like about being a therapist. Now, I sit in my office. I go out to the waiting room if it's a live session, an in-person session, I should say. I bring them back to my office. If it's a new client, greet them, welcome them, tell them a little about me, and then begin to explore their situation and what brings them in. I had one of those today. And for the first time in a long time, I finished up an hour later having no clue what they wanted. And so sometimes it just goes that way. That person could not articulate any particular goals, expressed a random group of dissatisfaction with life, some from childhood, some from adolescence, some from adulthood, some from now. But no clear sense of how they would change anything or what they would change. The only direct question was, and I quote, "What does he want?" I said, "I don't know. And if that's your question, you're in the wrong place." And because I'm not a spokesman for God. Now, I do my best to present truth, to confront reality, to encourage, support, and love people, but I don't claim to have any kind of direct pipeline to God. So I couldn't answer that question. Now, what will I do with that person? Well, I'll see him again. Again, help him hopefully be comfortable talking to me and help him sort out what he would actually like to accomplish. Now, I'm not being critical of this person because they may really not know what they want. They may be so confused, so frustrated, so hopeless that they truly can't articulate anything more than distress, unhappiness, loneliness, a few basic emotions, and that's all they can do. Well, that's okay. My job is to help them clarify that until we can get to something that can help them actually figure out how they want to move forward and in what direction. And then I help them figure out how to do that. So that was one of the 7 sessions today. A couple of them were celebrating success. People who've done really well have progressed after several years of work, some after 6 months. It varied. I think there were 2 or 3 of those, along with some others that had some progress that we celebrated. Some of it was educational. I did a lot about grief today. I gave some career advice where I just encouraged someone to go ahead and seek further training, and pointed out that if you're not furthering your education, whatever your career is, you're getting behind. And eventually you will not have anything of real value to offer an employer. And so it's always important to stay up with the trends in your chosen field and to add to your skills. And that doesn't matter whether you're a warehouse worker or an engineer or a therapist. You have to invest in the new technology, in not buying it, of course, but learning it and embracing it and moving ahead. So, and by the way, one of the things someone mentioned today was that they were no longer driving a truck because the trucks had computers in them and they had electronic log books and electronic processes through the way stations. And that person didn't want to deal with that. So technology is virtually in every aspect of our life. And if you don't embrace it, you are going to be further and further out of the loop and more unemployable. Now, it doesn't mean there isn't some way to be creative and earn a living. I'm not saying that, but it is important to stay current. It's important for me as a therapist. In fact, it's required to keep my license that I get 20 hours of training in a year. And so I do, clearly. And I always make it about things I can really use, like newer courses on domestic violence, for instance, like I did last year. I think I did 2 courses on advanced domestic violence and a basic domestic violence courses, even though I've had I don't know how many of those in my career. Even though I've read I don't know how many articles in those in my career. It's still important to expose oneself to the newest thinking. So, grief, career advice, monitoring improvement in addiction, a lot of building better self-image, worked with someone with sexual trauma that destroyed their life because they accepted that they were a piece of trash, in her words, because of the way she was treated. And her whole life went downhill and ended up in addiction and some other issues, and she's now rebuilding it all, but still hadn't ever really had anybody help her go back to the very beginning and do the healing and correct the misunderstanding that the actions of a rapist in any way affected who she was. It said nothing about her. It said everything about the rapist. And so we started some time ago working through the original event and putting that in a new light for her. But she now has, I don't know, 20 years in, and maybe more, in having lived as if she was a piece of trash. And now she has many events in there that have built on that original trauma that we'll need to go back and address. And so that's what we're starting to do. And she makes very good progress. So that's very rewarding work. So see clients from 10 to noon and 1 to 6. And that's my day as a therapist. Now, sometimes it's more complicated. Spent some time today helping someone sort out whether they were probably on the autism spectrum or not, had ADHD or not. Suggested they see somebody beside other than me for some specialty areas. So all of that is part of being a therapist in private practice. In that process, we're going through a transfer in who I work for, and that means a new piece of software to learn, new office procedures to learn. So there's that technical administrative side of being a therapist that you have to deal with every day and solve stupid little problems like the fact that this software does not keep one diagnosis through a case so that it shows up every time you see them. It's apparently the best we've figured out, it does it in the background, but this is really designed for a medical practice, not a mental health practice, and just not working very well. So there are real challenges with that. All part of it, and that's just the way it goes. Now, the job I had before this was a really interesting, challenging, fun job, just like this one. And I was an in-home family therapist practicing a structured model of family therapy for clients who were referred and were involved with Child Protective Services or the probation departments in their respective counties. And I was serving, from the middle of Indiana to the Ohio border and north and south from Indianapolis to Fort Wayne. So I was driving 600 to 800 miles a week and seeing 4 to 5 families at a time. But each session was 2.5 hours, and I was expected to do, let's see, what was it, 2 of those a week? Yeah. 2. And so it's really interesting being in someone's home for 2.5 hours, doing that twice a week and doing it for 6 months. It's really quite an interesting process. You really become, and one of the problems is you begin to have to really watch your boundary issues because you get comfortable being in someone's home sometimes and almost being, it's like you're the uncle that stopped by. And so you have to be careful to maintain the professional boundary there. And that can be a challenge sometimes, just because you're dealing with kids and they like you. In one family I worked with, the kids wrote Don's last day and lipstick on the wall when it was my last day to be there. And, I don't think they were celebrating. I think they were actually sorry I was leaving. And so it was kind of just a way of them expressing the connections that they had made with me and that I had made with them. And that was common because of the intensity of that approach. That's also probably the best family therapy model and structure I have ever seen in my career, and was very effective, provided you could get the family together and provided that there was interest at all in being parents to kids. So some very challenging stuff. Of course, those are families in real distress, lots of dysfunction, and seeing them pull together, begin to support each other and improve is really quite a thing. But that typically, those days, and that was Monday through Friday, from whenever we started to whenever we finished. And so a lot of times I would leave maybe as early as 7, sometimes 6:30 in the morning if I had a court hearing I had to attend for one of the families that was at 8 o'clock and an hour and a half away. So it could be an early morning. And then we started our last sessions no later, but that means up to 9 o'clock, which meant finishing at 11. I'm sorry, 9 o'clock. So we finished, sometimes we could finish as late as 11:30. And I tried not to do that because that's just way too late to be in a home. And it's just not a great situation. Plus, that's an awfully long day. And so I would try to be done by 10 with any sessions I had, and then come back home. And so that was quite a taxing job. Again, very, very rewarding when there was progress. Could be very frustrating working with some families, of course, and then seeing just out and out failures where kids were taken away from parents again, right in the middle of therapy because of something that happened. So challenging, difficult, very rewarding, really good therapy, though. You could really do some very good therapy. And it was a great model, had good supervision in that company. It's a very good company, very supportive of its employees and very respectful of its employees. So it was a good place to work. And that was a company called Scan Incorporated in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Although I was rarely in Fort Wayne, but was really a very good agency. I worked there about 2.5 years or so. And then the job before that was when I got back into being a direct provider of mental health services. And I worked as a mental health therapist in a adolescent prison for boys in Logansport, Indiana. And my day would start there at 9. And just before 9, I would pull into the parking lot, walk into the gate, get completely patted down, everything I had with me checked through for security reasons. And that was important because every so often an employee would get walked out and sometimes arrested for trafficking with the kids who were in there. We didn't have very many incidents of that. I was pretty nervous about taking that job because I was afraid I would see some institutional abuse of kids. And I really wasn't going to be part of that. What I found was a warden and support staff who were very much into reducing the recidivism rate. And the studies show that the more respectfully adolescents are treated in a facility like that, the less likely they are to reoffend. So the programs were specifically designed to change their behavior, support them in growth, teach them skills, continue their schooling, and not have them come back. Now, recidivism had gone down a lot in that facility when they switched to that model. So I was glad to be part of it. My day would start after the frisking, going through security. I would go to the office, punch in, because this company was not a good company to work for. It wasn't Department of Corrections. It was the mental health bidder or the healthcare bidder. that we were subcontracted through. And it was always the most recent lowest bidder. So typically not great pay, okay benefits, and not really a lot of concern or support for individuals, employees. So now I had some great supervision, and I got to work with one of the best psychiatrists I've ever worked with at that facility. So the mental health staff was really very good. The nursing staff was really very good. And most of the program people were very good. And honestly, the guards, they don't like to be called guards. They like to be called officers, correctional officers, which is what they are. Most of them were caring and good, not all of them. And I saw a few of them and reported a couple of things that shouldn't have gone on. And they got eventually fired because of their behavior towards kids or other staff. So that happened, but in general, it was a pretty well supported place to be. I never felt in danger there. I treated the boys with respect, treated them like they were the people they are, helped them see themselves in a better light, helped them improve their behavior, and helped a lot of people leave. And, it's kind of interesting in the Indiana juvenile prison system. The kids are sent there on an indeterminate sentence for the most part. And that means that they're there until the facility says they can leave or until the day before they turn 21. And so they really, if a kid came in, really behaved himself, worked hard, and didn't get in trouble, he could be out in less than 6 months, sometimes 3 or 4 months. And we had kids that were there for 2 or 3 years. Now, there were several reasons for that. Some were afraid to go home because they were involved in gang stuff and they didn't figure they would live long if they went home. Others had no home, and still others just could not accept the structure of the prison and just were constantly in trouble. And so they were there for a long time. I helped a number of those kids get themselves straightened out and move on. And it was an interesting way to do therapy because I didn't have appointments in my office. I mean, I could have, but I chose not to do that. I chose to catch them in the hallway or pull them off into a room and spend 15 to 30 minutes talking to them about something really specific in their behavior or how they were getting along or their concerns, their fears, that kind of stuff. And then moving on and talking to somebody else. I did that because their adolescents, virtually all of them had awful trauma histories, and their attention span was pretty short. And so I wanted to work within what they were capable of. So that's why I did short sessions, just pulled out of them doing something else, talked to them for 15, 20 minutes on average, and then let them go back to what they were doing. I found that actually to be pretty effective. Now, in addition to that, though, I also offered some classes in anger management and stress reduction, did some relaxation training. And so I would do all those, and then I would enter notes in the electronic records system. That was all part of it, doing some evaluations. Although not too many of those because we had a psychologist on staff, and actually two on staff, as well as a psychiatrist that came in a couple of times a week and saw the kids and had a staff meeting with us. So all in all, that was pretty well done. I did get tired of being searched once or twice a day, because if I went out for lunch, I had to be searched on the way back. That got old. And it's a pretty intense environment. And I don't know, after 2.5 years, we had a change in the company that we worked for. I didn't like the new company at all. And so I decided I would move further upstream in terms of where were the abused kids coming from. And that's why I took the job with SCAN in Fort Wayne to do family therapy, to see if we couldn't keep some of those kids from going to prison in the first place. And then, of course, then I moved on to my current job. So there's the backwards chronological order of my last 3 jobs and what it was like to be a therapist. Yeah, if that raises any questions, feel free to put them in the comments section, and I'll pull out some and answer some questions. Being a therapist is challenging. It's frustrating. It's rewarding. It's sitting for, all day long, every day. And I find I really have to get myself to get up and walk around a little bit in between sessions, just to keep from getting too stiff, getting mentally too, I don't know. Well, I need a little break in between each session so I can shift gears and go from one person to the next. Sometimes the sessions are pretty upsetting and or very intense. And so I need a short break, just physically, mentally, to be ready to talk to the next person. So it's figuring out all of that and staying on schedule, which is a challenge for me. I am not good at living by the clock. And the mental health practice lives by the clock. The other 2 didn't. This one does. And I'm not good at that. I tend to run behind. And I also tend to keep talking to a client that needs something instead of ending a session early. Now, I do end some sessions early if there's nothing really to talk about. And so when we get done what we need to get done, then we're done. And I don't string out sessions just to make them longer. But at the same time, I will go over if we're working on something important and it's we're just not in a place to stop. I don't stop until we can get there. So I can end up being 15 or 20 minutes late. And that's what happened today. I got behind with my second client and never got caught back up until 20 after 6. And then had to do 3 sets of notes. So that's why I just barely made it home before the live stream started and wasn't ready to go at 7. So some days are just like that. Other days, tomorrow I have a couple of openings, and I didn't have those openings. So typically that's somebody who is either sick and is canceled, or something's come up, interfered, and they've rescheduled for a different time. But right now, except for those 2 openings tomorrow, I have no openings in my schedule until the first week in March. And that's a little frustrating. I don't like that right now, because I like to get people right back in when we're working on an active, acute kind of problem, so that I see them at least every 2 weeks. And so I do have quite a few clients I'm doing supportive work with, which means they have achieved a level of maintenance. They're doing pretty well. They need to continue on medications, and then, but they still need some encouragement from time to time. And I will typically see them monthly. So I do have quite a few of those. And then I have the acute cases, and those are the ones I like to get in more often. So what I'll typically do is, after the intake, then we'll go to the next open appointment, but then schedule 2 or 3 appointments 2 weeks apart to make sure that they can get in at the intensity that's appropriate to their situation. Obviously, being a therapist can be pretty draining. And I have found out in my life that if I don't take a week off about every 3 months, I get really overwhelmed. I get burned out. And I feel that in myself as just fatigue, but also a little bit of that numbness that you don't want to have. And so I have to take at least a week off about every 3 months. And then when I come back, I'm okay again for another 3 months. And so I've just found whatever, that's the cycle I work best on. And I'm sure each therapist has their own rhythm for that. The problem is finding an organization to work for that will support that. If you go to work in a hospital-based system and they only give you a week off a year or 2 weeks off a year, which is still the case, you really got to get creative about that. You got to really do a lot of self-care to be able to extend the time you're functional. And that was the problem I had with the prison employer, is that their time off system really was pretty minimal and not adequate to giving people even a day off here or there when there was some kind of upsetting crisis that somebody needed to take some time off from. And that happens. And mental health workers need to be able to take that time off and are not very well supported. That could open the door to a whole new rant that I'm not going to do right now. I will do it at another point and maybe in a little bit. I'm going to try one more time to focus that camera. I can't tell if it's me or nope, that's worse. So I think I found out before if I just put it all the way out, but that's looking out of focus to me. So maybe I'm just a little too close. I probably need to put a different lens in. Anyway, we'll just deal with that. If I look fuzzy, I'm just fuzzy. So please be sure to enter any comments, any questions, anything you'd like to know about. As a therapist, there are times when something happens in a session that is the first time you've ever seen it, the first time you've ever witnessed some psychotic behavior, for instance, that you go, oh my gosh, this is really a person that is literally out of their mind. And I hope I can deal with this. What am I going to do if I can't? How do I take care of this? And then you go to your training, you take time to think, you deal with the situation, and you move on. And then you talk to your peers about it. And can be very helpful. They'll share experiences they've had, talk about what the reaction was, all that sort of thing. And those have been the moments in my career where I've learned a lot about people, and my ability to work with people is when I've had those kind of either trauma flashbacks or psychotic episodes, and have been able to help people come back to present reality. And that's been very, very interesting. I have, I think, 3 clients right now with legitimate dissociative identity disorder, or what used to be called multiple personality disorder. And in all those cases, I've been able to help them switch back to their, I think of it as their executive function personality, whoever it is that's sort of in the person that the other fragments, the other personalities are protecting in one way or another. And so that's been interesting, incredibly fascinating. I've done a lot of hypnosis work, seeing what people are capable of doing in the creativity of their unconscious is just never-ending fascination. And so those are the just, wow, I really love this. And people are so interesting. The downside of being a therapist is if you come home after 7 straight hours of talking, you don't feel much like talking. And so sometimes that gets in the way of family life. And so being able to, preserve part of yourself for your family is very important. Sometimes I'm better at than others. But I can be pretty tired when I come home and not really looking for any interaction really at all, looking for just some brain dead activity like television or computer gaming or sleeping, something like that. So that's one of those are a couple of the challenges of mental health work, being able to take time off when you need to, and then the strain of talking with people in depth for hours and hours a day, multiple days a week. And sometimes I thought today, I think really all these people come to see me to help me improve myself. Because the bad part of being a therapist is sooner or later, every single problem you've ever had in your life is going to be presented by someone else as their problem in front of you. And you always have to go through the, oh, geez, I hope I worked this out myself. What did I do? What do I still need to do? There's all of that self-examination that kind of goes on with that. And it can be a challenge not to begin to make it about you instead of about them. And so you always have to go back to what are they saying to me right now? I think I told someone recently that one of the things I really liked about being a therapist is that the therapist mind, skills are his instruments. And I was a jazz drummer for quite a while and still love jazz. And the interaction of a jazz group and with improvisation, making it up as you go, the interchange between the musicians, the teamwork between the musicians, the way it all weaves in and out, and the different solos and the different parts people add to it live as they go along, was always just a wonderful thing to feel and be part of. And I told someone recently that being a therapist is as close to being a musician as anything else I've ever really thought about or ever done, because there's that constant interaction with the person, taking the words they're using and helping them see and feel and experience a better future out of those words and the words I add. And it's all made up as we go along based on the skills I've learned. And that's the way it is with being a musician, especially a jazz musician, is that you practice and practice and practice until your thoughts and ideas come out through your instrument. And that's the way it works in therapy. And so it's just an absolutely fascinating way to make a living and to contribute to the world And those are the reasons I love it. And in spite of occasionally being so tired of it, I don't want to do it again. I always come back to the reasons I love it and the responsibilities I have as a therapist, which is to always do my best for the person in front of me. So I don't know. There's some reflections tonight on what it's like to be a therapist, how I view therapy. Well, I guess I haven't really talked about that, but the experience of being a therapist for me. And I'm sure every therapist would have different things that they get out of it, that they give to it, that it takes from them. And so it would be interesting. And that would be a fun discussion to get another therapist or two on here that we could have a discussion to answer questions together. Maybe that's something I'll work on. That would be kind of fun. Please add to the comments if you think that's a good idea and would like to hear that kind of a discussion, then let me know. Obviously, if there are other comments that you have or questions, that's what I'm here to do, is to respond to those questions and comments the best I can. So certainly feel free to ask whatever you want to ask. Let's see, let me just look at a couple things here to make sure I haven't missed anything. I certainly hope this went live. It says it did. Yep. Yep. So it's live. I can't watch it because it drives me crazy because there's that little bit of a lag. So I don't watch it on YouTube. Let's see, maybe some eyes. I shared on my Facebook page something. I didn't create it. Like I said, somebody else sent it out. In fact, it comes from something called I'm So Blessed Daily, but it's called Breaking the Generational Curse. And it says, quit yelling at your kids before they go to bed and expect them to sleep well. Quit yelling at your kids in the morning right after they wake up before school and expect them to have a good day. You set the tone for your children. You set the tone for your voice that they will always remember in their heads. You become their inner voice. Don't be their inner critic. Speak life, speak love, speak bravery and kindness and hope, speak wisdom and truth, but most of all, listen to your children. That is such important advice, but man cannot live by meme alone. So there's a lot in there. And I have a client now who has been working for the last 6 months at reducing the yelling that she does. Her husband still yells a lot, and I've given her some suggestions on how to demonstrate to him that yelling doesn't work. But that was really the first realization she had to come to, was yelling doesn't work. Yelling just raises the volume level. It doesn't get good results. And so there are far better ways to talk to your children. And they're in that meme. They're in there speaking, listening, listening, two, respecting what kids are doing and not assume that they're doing nothing and demand that they do what you want them to do at any given instant. Now, I encourage people to give warnings. Hey, in 5 minutes, I'm going to need you to clean up the room, put everything away. And start getting ready for bed. In 10 minutes is what you're going to have to do. I wouldn't go in much longer than that, but it depends on the age of the kid. And that way they get a warning to wrap it up. And they get a chance to kind of close what they're doing. So, and if you want to flip it around, think of it the other way. You're sitting there watching some television program you're really engaged in, and your kid comes up and says, "Hey, I need a glass of water," or "Can you help me with my homework?" And you're going, "I don't want to be interrupted right now." And you can get irritable about it. You can say, "No, I'm not helping you right now," or "I'll help you in a little while," or "I'll help you tomorrow." Whatever you put off like that. And then you flip that around and your kids are doing something they're really engrossed in, playing a game with friends online, whatever it is, and you say, "Come do this right now." They're going to have the same reaction you had when you were watching television. So instead, treat them the way you would want to be treated. Say to them, "I'm busy right now. I will help you in just a little bit." So then you turn it around and you say, "I see you're busy right now and you're having fun, but in 15 minutes, I need you to do this." And in 15 minutes, I need you to wrap this up and help me for a while. And then you can come back and do it some more. So that you respect that they are actually doing something important to them. And that's just one little tip, but I think it helps the way families interact with each other. It teaches respect. It teaches self-discipline. It teaches self-control. It implies that kids are certainly capable of ending something and doing another task when they're given the directive. Now you're all going to say, "Yeah, but they don't do it." And then I end up getting mad and yelling at them. And yes, that is true. That's exactly what will happen for a while. And then it'll always happen depending on what you do. If you just get into a yelling match with them, back and forth, okay, 5 more minutes or whatever, then it'll always continue to be that way. Or you just give up and do it yourself. It'll always be that way. However, if you say, "Well, I told you you had 15 minutes. That was enough time for you to wrap up or get to a point where you could stop. So you come do this now. And if you don't, the consequence is going to be no game for the rest of the night." Now, not a month, the rest of the night, or the rest of today, or today and tomorrow. Something short, concrete, and appropriate to whatever it is they were doing. So, and then absolutely stick by your ground. Do not back off on that. You've got to enforce it. And that's why they learn to stop arguing with you. And that's really the whole goal, is to stop the arguing, stop the yelling, stop the back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And nobody enjoys that. And it makes family life no fun. So just a couple of little quick tips on how to reduce the yelling, increase the respect, voice the love in your family. Okay. Be interested in your comments about that, whether you're watching this live or you watch it later. I'm really going to have to work on that. I don't know why it's so out of focus, although it could be that I dropped it when I was on vacation and it's never going to be in focus again. I don't know. But I'll check that out and get that fixed before next time. Okay. It's now after 8. I know we got a late start, but it's gone over 40 minutes or 45 minutes, and I've kind of finished talking for today. So I'm going to stop this now. I will check for comments later on and respond as I can around time, but I really look forward to reading them and to seeing what you've got to say about it. So again, thank you very much. And we'll be back here again next week, Wednesday night, 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Thank you. Good night.